I was walking down the hallway of Westbrook Middle School when I saw the commotion. A couple of uniformed officers were standing near the lockers, their voices raised, gesturing toward a young girl holding a sketchpad to her chest. She couldn't have been more than 12. Thin braids, bright red sneakers, and eyes filled with panic. Her hands clutched the pad like it was her last shield. "You need to hand that over," one of the officers said, his tone sharper than necessary. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said softly. "My name's Monica Ellis, and I teach history here." I wasn't supposed to be in that hallway. I had stayed late grading papers, but once I saw what was happening, I couldn't walk past. "What's going on here?" I asked, stepping closer. The older officer turned to me. "This student was reported for drawing disturbing images." I glanced at the girl, who was trembling. "That's her sketchbook," I said. "Since when is drawing a crime?" The younger officer, a little too eager, said, "It could be a sign of something deeper. We have to make sure she's not a threat." "A threat?" She was barely over 4 feet tall. The girl looked up at me. "They won't let me call my mom." That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I knelt beside the girl, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" "Imani," she whispered. I turned back to the officers. "You're telling me that a middle schooler drawing in her notebook is enough to detain her without notifying a parent?" "She was sketching scenes with law enforcement," the older officer said. "Aggressive ones." It raised concern. "She's an artist," I snapped. "You can't police her imagination." The younger cop looked irritated. "Protocol is protocol." But I wasn't backing down. "Then follow the actual protocol and let her call her guardian." Reluctantly, they allowed her to take out her phone. Her fingers shook as she dialed. She placed the call on speaker. It rang once. Then a deep, composed voice answered, "Imani, are you safe?" She took a shaky breath. "They said my drawings were dangerous. They won't let me go." There was a pause on the line. Then, calm but cold, the voice responded, "Put one of them on the phone." The older cop hesitated. "Who is this?" The voice answered without hesitation, "This is Commander Renee Marshall. You're speaking to the Director of Internal Affairs for the city." The hallway went silent. Both officers froze. Imani slowly looked up, and I saw the slightest trace of a smile begin to return to her face. The phone trembled slightly in the officer's hand as he slowly brought it to his ear. "Ma'am," he said stiffly, "we were just responding to a report." "You're speaking, officer," Renee Marshall cut in, her tone sharp and unshakable, "but you're not explaining. My daughter called me terrified because 2 grown men cornered her over pencil sketches in a public school." There was a beat of silence before she continued. "I suggest you put the teacher on the line. Now." The officer handed the phone to me like it was a live grenade. "She wants to speak with you." I took it. "Commander Marshall. This is Ms. Ellis, I teach here." Her voice softened, just a little. "Thank you for stepping in. Please confirm, did my daughter threaten anyone? Did she cause any disruption?" "Not at all. She was quietly drawing in the library during her free period. The only thing she disrupted was silence." "I see," she replied, ice returning to her tone. "Then this is a clear overstep. I'm en route. Tell those officers to stay exactly where they are. Do not let them leave." "Yes, ma'am." I handed the phone back to Imani, who ended the call. The officers looked different now, unsteady, avoiding eye contact, shifting uncomfortably. The authority they had walked in with had cracked. Imani looked up at them and said calmly, "You're in so much trouble." 15 minutes later, the school doors swung open with a commanding slam. Commander Renee Marshall strode into the building like she owned every square inch of it, and in a way, she did. Dark navy slacks, a crisp white blouse under a tailored blazer, and a badge clipped prominently at her waist. Her expression was unreadable, carved from stone. I stepped forward. "Commander, where is she?" she asked. I pointed down the hall. Imani was sitting on the bench near the front office, sketchpad back in her hands. She looked up and, for the first time all day, her eyes lit up. "Mom!" Commander Marshall crossed the distance quickly, kneeling and pulling her daughter into a hug. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Imani nodded. "I didn't do anything." "I know, baby. I know." Then she stood and turned toward the officers. "Names. Now." The older cop tried to recover his composure. "Officer Kent. And this is Officer Mullins." She took a slow breath. "Officers Kent and Mullins, you are both hereby relieved of duty pending an internal review. Your actions today were inappropriate, unauthorized, and unjustified. You confronted a minor without cause, denied her the right to contact her guardian, and overstepped your role in a public institution without clear protocol." They stood frozen, their mouths slightly open. Commander Marshall leaned in closer, her voice low but lethal. "You targeted my child. In my city. And you thought there would be no consequences." Officer Kent tried to salvage the moment. "Ma'am, we were only trying to protect the other students." The images she drew were intense. Commander Marshall didn't blink. "You mean the ones of armored figures with no faces? That's symbolism, officer. You don't get to criminalize creativity just because you don't understand it." She turned to Principal Hayes, who had quietly arrived during the confrontation and now stood awkwardly near the lockers. "You allowed this?" she asked, her tone unwavering. He raised his hands. "I didn't call them. One of the lunch monitors saw the drawings and thought they should be reported." She stepped toward him. "So instead of asking a teacher or a counselor, she called the police on a child. And you let that response escalate this far?" Hayes stammered, "We followed procedure," she cut him off. "You followed fear. Not policy. And now you're going to follow liability." I watched, impressed and stunned, as Commander Marshall took Imani's hand and led her away from the officers like she was reclaiming something sacred. But before she left, she paused and looked back. "To anyone here who thought you were dealing with a powerless little girl," she said, locking eyes with everyone, "you just learned whose legacy she carries." And with that, she and Imani walked out of the building, side by side, unshaken, unbroken, and unmistakably victorious. A week later, the atmosphere at Westbrook Middle School had shifted. The officers were officially suspended pending investigation, and a district-wide memo had gone out mandating staff to receive new training on student rights, guardian notification, and cultural sensitivity, though no one used those exact words. As for Imani, she returned to school on Monday with her head high and her sketchpad tucked under her arm like armor. But something had changed. In art class that afternoon, I walked past her desk and noticed a new piece in progress. It wasn't aggressive. It was powerful. A girl, standing in a hallway, facing down two towering shadows in uniform. Behind her, a fierce silhouette stood guard, one hand on the girl's shoulder, the other holding a badge that glinted like a shield. I stopped and looked at her. "Is that your mom?" Imani smiled and nodded. "She's not just my mom," she said. "She's the reason I don't stay quiet anymore." That moment hit me harder than I expected. The school had nearly silenced her over fear of a pencil drawing. Instead, they'd ignited the fire of someone raised by a woman who understood what it meant to protect and defend, on every battlefield, including this one. And now they knew exactly who raised her. By Friday, the story had already made its way around the district, and beyond. A parent had quietly filmed part of the hallway confrontation and posted it anonymously. The video showed Imani clutching her sketchpad, the officers towering over her, and then, Commander Renee Marshall walking in like a storm in heels. The clip ended with her now viral line, "You just learned whose legacy she carries." The video exploded. Local news picked it up. Then national outlets. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was clarifying. It showed what happened when authority was used not to intimidate, but to protect. Other parents began asking questions. Why had armed officers responded to a sketchbook? Why had the school failed to intervene sooner? Why had no one contacted the child's guardian before escalation? Imani never asked to become a symbol. She was just a girl who loved to draw. But now her story was being talked about in classrooms, on podcasts, at school board meetings. And at the heart of all the noise? A quiet image, a sketchpad held tightly in small hands. And a mother who answered the call before anyone else even thought to listen. 3 weeks later, the city's Civil Accountability Board released its findings. Officers Kent and Mullins had violated protocol in multiple ways, failing to notify the guardian of a minor unlawfully attempting to seize personal property without cause, escalating a non-criminal situation without administrative approval. The board's conclusion was clear: their actions reflected poor judgment, a lack of discernment, and an unacceptable misunderstanding of their role within a school environment. Their badges were surrendered. Quietly, without a press conference. Just a line in a city memo, reassigned from field duty. Pending final dismissal review. Commander Renee Marshall declined to comment publicly. She didn't need to. Instead, she focused on something bigger. With the help of parents and a few influential allies in the education system, she launched a citywide program, Draw the Line, a student-led art initiative that educated both kids and staff on creative expression, boundaries, and conflict resolution. The first featured artist? Imani. Her sketch, The Girl and the Shadows, was framed and hung in the entryway of Westbrook Middle. Not as a warning. As a reminder. Months passed. Seasons changed. Imani's story faded from the headlines, but not from memory. Visitors to Westbrook Middle still paused at the front entrance where her framed artwork hung in silence. Below it, a small plaque was added by the new principal: creativity is not defiance. Expression is not a threat. Every child carries a story, it's our job to listen before we judge. Imani, now more confident than ever, started leading after-school art workshops for younger students. She taught them how to put their feelings into lines and colors instead of silence. As for Commander Marshall, she didn't bask in recognition. She never mentioned the incident again in public. But on the first day of each new semester, she walked her daughter to the school doors, leaned down, and whispered the same thing: never shrink, Imani. They can question your work, but they'll never touch your worth. Imani always walked in smiling. Because everyone now knew, she wasn't just a schoolgirl with a sketchbook. She was the legacy of someone who would never let her be erased. 1 year later, Westbrook Middle hosted its first citywide student art exhibition, an event born from a moment that nearly silenced a young voice, but instead sparked a movement. They called it Legacy in Lines. Students from all backgrounds displayed their work in the gymnasium, now transformed into a glowing gallery of color, contrast, and imagination. There were drawings of astronauts, superheroes, family dinners, storms, silence. Some were joyful. Some were angry. All of them were honest. And at the center of the exhibition was a special display titled Imani's Corner. It featured not just her now famous sketch, The Girl and the Shadows, but a new piece. This one showed a young girl standing on a hill made of broken pencils, sketchbooks, and paper. Around her stood dozens of other children, each holding their own tools of creation. Behind them, a figure stood watch, not in a uniform, not with a badge, but with an open hand and fierce eyes. The caption read, "We rise not because they allow us, but because someone taught us we could." And below that? A simple dedication, for my mom. For every voice they tried to quiet. The exhibit closed with a standing ovation. Not for the drama of the past, but for what it had become, a spark that turned into light. A child who became a leader. A moment that became a legacy. Months after the exhibit, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at Westbrook Middle School. Handwritten. No return address. It was passed to the principal, who then handed it to Ms. Ellis, who, in turn, brought it straight to Imani. It read, "I don't expect forgiveness. But I need to say this, I watched that video over and over. I thought I was protecting people that day. The truth is, I was protecting a system I didn't fully understand. You were just a kid, and I treated you like a suspect instead of a student. I was wrong. What you created changed me. I've stepped away from the force. I'm learning now, not just how to listen, but how to really see. Thank you." Mullins Imani stared at the letter for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just nodded once and folded the paper carefully, placing it in the back of her sketchbook, among her rough drafts, practice lines, and quiet beginnings. She didn't need to say anything. Because her story had already spoken louder than any words he ever could. And somewhere, in the space between that apology and her silence, the world had tilted a little more toward justice. Years later, Imani stood on the stage of her old middle school, now as a guest speaker, not a student. The auditorium was filled with new faces. Younger students who hadn't been there during the hallway incident, who only knew the story through whispers, artwork, and the exhibit still proudly displayed near the front office. She stepped to the podium, now taller, older, confident in a way few adults ever manage. Her voice carried gently but firmly across the room. "I was once told to put my sketchbook away. That it was dangerous. But the truth is, some of the most powerful things in the world don't make a sound. They don't shout. They don't fight. They just exist. And they refuse to disappear." She looked toward the front row, where her mother sat with quiet pride. "I'm not here because I was brave. I'm here because someone taught me that silence isn't the same as peace, and that drawing the truth is a kind of power no one can confiscate." There was no standing ovation. No cameras. Just a room full of students, watching her in absolute stillness. Imani reached into her bag and pulled out the same old sketchbook, weathered now, taped at the edges. She held it up. This isn't a weapon. It's a witness. And I plan to keep filling it." That day, when she walked off stage, a girl in the second row quietly slipped her a folded piece of notebook paper. Inside was a pencil drawing. It showed Imani standing on a mountain made of paper, reaching down to help someone else up. Imani smiled. She tucked it into her sketchbook, alongside all the others. And so, the legacy continued, one line at a time.